I'm annoyed. Let's do the news. Right now, there's a viewing of George Floyd's funeral that is currently taking place. There's also protests that continue all across towns and cities in the United States. I want you to notice something. Look at the color of their skin. Those are no darkies, not many at all, in fact. In these protests, they're multiracial, identities, multiple. They're out there. It's not just a black thing. And that is euphoric. Because it means that people are supplanting their own issues and their grievances with our particular system, our political system, and the way wealth is distributed in that system. Some of them don't even entirely know what the thing is. They just know they're angry at the way our system is organized, the way it allocates wealth, how abrasive it is to the poor, while how generous it is to the rich, as if they're the virtuous just because they are rich. They're sick and tired of the system behaving that way, and they're sick and tired of their political apparatus being incapable of dealing with those things. Meaning you have no vote in regards to issues of war and foreign policy, because they, for the most part, agree. You have no vote on issues of, let's say, economics in real terms, because both parties, for the most part, are capitalistic parties. Both parties ultimately agree. I mean, you basically had them quibbling over whether or not people were going to get a few extra bucks. The poor were going to get a few extra bucks, and they gave trillions of dollars to the rich. In the midst of a time of massive income inequality, the virtuous rich mattered more than the dirty poor who didn't deserve it. Why is your system organized in that way? Where you have a top small percent gets so much and the other part so little, and you say that's fair. Well, that system is not appointed by God. That system is created by men, and the people of that society can look at that and say that social contract no longer works for us. That system is not fair. It is inherently and fundamentally flawed and unfair in regard to the way human beings are appreciated and dealt with. And they can revoke the right of that government by going into the streets, especially when the political apparatus doesn't give them what they need as human beings to persist. I'm enthused by that, because the public at some point, even though it didn't necessarily have a demand when it did so, my argument had always been you need to thrust yourself outside of the political space, and they did that. But they did that by supplanting everything that was going on from the standpoint of the politics, the loss from Sanders, the 40 million people without a job, even the number of people who were dying from the COVID-19 virus and the disproportionate number. All right here. All of these catastrophes take place from the standpoint of one. And when you get the evictions and everything else, those things are going to matter. Now, the catch becomes, and the question is, what is the political space doing to accommodate all of these protests? And that's where it gets interesting. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you are digging this content, please like, share, and subscribe. You can always support this content through PayPal or Patreon. This content is brought to you by you, and I appreciate you the opportunity for allowing me to do it. Now, the catch becomes, what is your political system doing in order to accommodate all of these people, millions of people, every state, 50 states, small towns, big cities, out there, gyrating, angry, marching, chanting. I was one of them in the weekend. It was a euphoric feeling to be out there with all of these other people. Well, I agree with all of them on that, because you had multiple people with different ideas in regards to what they were there for. Some were there for, again, supplanting their own grievances, which makes this interesting, because even though this might have been the spark, the concerns associated with that spark are broader than what people are initially talking about now. And part and parcel to that is because of this divide that black politics has taken by interacting with the Democratic Party, the severing of economics from the thing of race, to make it as if these are two separate issues, when those are not two separate issues at all, especially if there's a legacy associated with that race that is intimately linked to issues of poverty. Through this comes many. And that's where the interesting part lies. What is the thing that quells the mob? Righteous mob. The mob that has 80% public support right now. What is the thing that quells the mob? What is sufficient to quell all of these protests all across the world, not just the United States? Righteous indignation. You kneeled on a man's throat for 9 minutes. How can you be so depraved to do that to a man that you knew? That is utterly disgusting, and did so casually, because to him, this is how he does his job day after day after day after day after day. There's nothing unusual about this, because this is how I do my job. I'm just a cop like every other cop in 50 states. And the world looked at that and was aghast by that. Infinite justice! Even when he is down, even when he is not moving, even when he is begging and pleading for his life, even when he cries for his mom. God, that is so fucking angry. And he's like, casual. Yes, that is a disturbing fucking thing to realize. And the world wept. Angry. How do you quell all of that? How do you deal with that? Now, the catch becomes your political system that has been utterly and entirely bereft of caring at all about what the public wants. Now has to accommodate all of this, because now those people have gone out of the political system. Sanders was the compromise. But fine, the Democratic Party, who's supposed to be the one that's attentive to the needs of the left, who has not been attentive to the needs of the left for fucking God knows how long, because the left has accepted you have nowhere else to go, and has allowed the party to get worse and worse and worse. So you have John F. Kennedy at one point, Joe Biden right now. You have people like Eisenhower and Nixon, who was our last lefty president, even though he was a Republican, to Donald Trump. Nowhere else to go. A race to the bottom. That's what nowhere else to go is. It doesn't matter who that person is. He's going to get my vote regardless. And they get worse and worse and worse, move further and further and further to the right. And you have no accountability in the process because you're terrified of the Republican. This is not a two-party system. These are two birds, one bird, two wings. That's all this is. They fundamentally agree on the world the way it is. It's not like you have a socialist party and some other party and another party that have fundamentally different ways of looking at the world. We've been conned into this notion of a singular party state under the guise of having two parties. Not to mention, if the only thing you can do is flow back and forth and both parties are captured, how do you get what you want out of the political space? When that rich guy, Klobuchar, the one with no neck, comes out and says, if you keep using that issue of class and income inequality, I am going to shut my paycheck. I'm not going to give you any money anymore. Why would he say that? He's saying that to tell Democrats who rely on the money that he's putting into their pockets to say, stop talking about income inequality. You're trespassing on my soil and you're no longer going to get my cash. That is a plutocrat telling somebody who's supposed to represent you to shut up about an issue that all of you and many of you, millions of you, care greatly about and want to be represented for. And the majority of the Democrats want to be represented on those issues. And that is off the table. So what are people to do when both parties are captured by corporate interests? Well, in this case, the parties are now going to try to do something to try to accommodate that. The Democratic Party, the place where movements go to die. And we have right now a legitimate movement that has the potential to be something grand, especially if more and more people and more energy starts being dumped into it from other areas, that starts to broaden the concerns of this as we realize that we are united in the things that we need and the things that we should be pushing for right now. Because all of us, basically, this issue hits it to the heart of inequality. Inequality, I would wager to you, is the issue that many of these people are out there angry about, even if they can't articulate the fact that it's inequality, because they may not feel comfortable, because this basically is something that took place to an African American who was killed by cops. Meaning the lens of this is being touched as a black thing. But it's not entirely a black thing. It's an inequality thing, by definition, because it's a black thing. I'll get to that in a moment, but the political space is trying to accommodate this. The Democratic Party came out in the Senate and did this.
All right, welcome back, everyone. You're looking at live pictures there of Democrats on Capitol Hill taking a knee. We believe it's going to last for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. That is the duration of the time Officer Derek Chauvin had his...
Personally, I would be more impressed if they laid down, brought out Chauvin, and let him put his knee on their throats for 8 minutes. I'd be more impressed. I'm just being honest with you. This is performative trash. Performative trash. You should be ashamed of yourselves doing this. And the media should be ashamed for even allowing them to do this and not ridicule what is taking place. These people are the creators and the propagators of this system of criminal justice. God damn it, understand what I'm saying. The people who are doing this right now. Do you want them to do this, or do you want them to do legislation? Meaning, do you really care when this does nothing? This is entirely for optics and for politics. The real world material consequences of the things that they decide is the things that we want. Your job is to pass laws. This is performative trash. You have spent your entire careers building this criminal justice system. Democrats. It was a Democratic mayor. It was a Democratic governor. And yes, there was a Democratic president when Black Lives Matter was started. Amy Klobuchar, Democrat, Chauvin, allowed him to get off. Those were Democrats that was managing that criminal justice system that were producing those outcomes. Be very clear. Don't tell me go vote if you don't want. There is no one to vote for, which is why the people are in the streets. These people, all of them who's taking a knee right now, is relying on weak memories of what they were doing in the past out of fear for Trump. Don't allow them a pass. Nancy Pelosi, the leaked memo showing her saying, don't offer support to Black Lives Matter. Don't offer support to Black Lives Matter. You don't believe me? Right here. Leaked 2015 memo told Democrats don't offer support for Black Lives Matter policy positions. Nancy Pelosi. Where is she now? Where is she now? She's right here. Taking a knee. It's all politics. It's all performative trash. The reality of things, the things that you should care about, you should not care about that one iota. Because the real truth is, they created the system. And what you need them to do is dismantle the system. But they are not going to want to dismantle the system because they hate the fact that those people are out there trying to push them to do anything. What they would give you is something to try to quell and shut you up without actually giving you anything real and substantial. If you do not give a demand, what they're going to try to do is supplant anything that you may want within the context of what they give you, hoping that it will be enough to shut you up. When in real world terms, when you look at it, especially in the way that it operates in the real world, it's probably not going to change much at all, and especially not fix the problem itself. And that's what they're doing. Performative trash, kneeling, and then putting out this. Right here. Democrats in Congress unveil a bill to rein in bias and excessive force in policing. Interesting. The measure will curtail existing legal protections that shield police officers who are accused of misconduct from being prosecuted, and will impose new restrictions to prevent law enforcement officers from using deadly force except as a last resort. It includes many proposals such as civil rights activists have been pushing for decades against opposition from police unions and law enforcement groups. Never again should the world be subjected to witnessing what we saw on the streets of Minneapolis, the slow murder of an individual by a uniformed officer, said Representative Karen Bass, the chairwoman for Congressional Black Caucus. Immediately beforehand, the four lawmakers joined with Democratic leaders to honor George Floyd, a black man, by kneeling for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Why was the cop there? Listen to what I'm saying here. If I can make an argument to you, and I can show you statistically that situations of poverty have certain outcomes. Doesn't matter what the race is. The outcomes comes up the same. It's almost determinative in some respects to a certain percentage. And I can show you that. And you can see that human health, quality of life, time frame, how they engage the society itself, are in many ways determinative to the society that produces those things. Which makes the point that if you get rid of the poverty in the neighborhood, and that neighborhood becomes a thriving neighborhood, then you don't need the cops there. The point I'm getting at is your issue is that there is a poverty that we allow policy-wise. And in allowing that policy of poverty, because we don't want to deal with those things in real terms, we're okay with the Waltons having billions of dollars. We say that's okay, that's fair. We're okay with Bezos becoming a trillionaire. We look at that and say that's fair. Now, if you were standing outside of the world, you should say that's obscene that a small number of people are able to create an excuse that the rest of the population allows for all of their labor to be sucked up and used for their own whims. But that's what we have. And you have no way for your political system to change that. It's just not. You can vote on Coke and Pepsi. You're not voting on whether your country has relationships with Wall Street or relationships with this lobby or that country. That stuff is off the table. Hence, in the streets. Hence, in the streets. Now, the wild part about this is all of these people who are kneeling, they are infinitely culpable of the system. Right now, the person who's running for the president of the United States, this guy, tough on crime. Joe Biden spends 16 minutes talking about how he's the toughest SOB on crime. Listen for yourself.
We have three equal branches of the government. One branch, the presidency, is supposed to enforce the laws. Now, if you wonder why I'm so frustrated, Mr. President, I've been dealing with this issue, crime. I have been either the sponsor or co-sponsor of every major tough piece of legislation relating to dealing with the criminal element in this country in the last 10 years, as many others have. And I hear the president tell me I'm not tough on crime. And he gets a death penalty once. Is he trying to tell me there's only one person out there in the last 1,000 days that has met the statutory requirement of death as a consequence of being a drug kingpin? Is there only one drug kingpin who murdered somebody that got caught in the last 1,000 days? Is that what he's saying to me? Or is he saying to me that for whatever reasons, they were not able to or chose not to use the laws at the disposal of them made available by this very tough Congress on crime? Mr. President.
He's arguing to the right of Ronald Reagan to have somebody put on death row. I can show you speeches where Joe Biden says, I don't care how people were raised. I don't care how they grew up. I don't care about the culture that brought them. I don't care if they were in poverty. I don't care if they were drinking lead water. I don't care. Lock them up. And they say Joe Biden does everything but hang somebody with this. This is constructed. Democratic Party. They want to be tough on crime, throw them in prison. He constructed the system that incentivized that level of policing to kill George Floyd. Those people who are kneeling right now, some of them were in Congress constructing those bills. This is the point where I'm saying, don't let your memory fail you in this process. These people who are right now trying to co-opt this particular movement were infinitely responsible for the system that produced it. Here's another one. Balanced budget. Because I'm trying to make the point to you that simultaneously with I'm going to dump a ton of money in crime, we also need to balance the budget, meaning cut expenses. It's not unclear that if you're talking about a balanced budget amendment, you're basically saying we are going to stop the government from spending money. We're going to choke the government, especially regarding services. Guess who was for this policy? More policing, cut services.
Before us, the balanced budget amendment, about which many of us have expressed serious reservations, the effects of which are in both the short and the long term cannot be predicted with any degree of certainty. We'll hear a good deal of hyperbole on this amendment, promises by those that this is going to cure all, and promises by those, if it passes, that we're going to go to hell in a handbasket and rapidly, and all our liberties will be taken from us. I hope we kind of keep our eye on the ball here and at least have an open mind.
Just so we're clear, this is not, it's not magic per se. If your government is arguing we're going to balance our budget, then that means money and resources are going to be sucked away from something else in order to make that balance. Your government doesn't have to balance a budget. Your government is not a kitchen table. This is a certain level of right-wing incompetence on this. And yet, here we have somebody who's supposedly a Democrat basically saying we need to balance our budget. Cut services, cut expenses, government to the bone, more police. Is it possible that those things are somehow related? That in the same way you're arguing this and then arguing that, that maybe those things are somehow related. The resources that you are sucking away from those communities may be in part and parcel to why you need more cops in those communities. I'm making the point that the level of inequality is creating the disorder that you are trying to do something about, but only doing so in a token way. They created this problem. Their token gesture is not going to address and deal with the issue. And if you notice, like I said before, they will give you something that doesn't really address this. The cops supposedly already don't supposed to shoot you until it's necessary. So I don't necessarily know what this is supposed to do in that process. Even if you take away that particular order, it doesn't get away from the abuse. It doesn't get away from harassment. It doesn't get away from flagrant abuses of authority. There's all sorts of things that are associated with the way cops do their behavior. What is more important in this is why the cops are necessary in the various communities at all. Why are those communities over-policed? And is it possible that if you bring those communities up, where those communities are healthy, a societal thing of saying we are not going to accept poverty, that is a societal choice, that those communities naturally, organically, cops become redundant. The issue is poverty. The issue is inequality. That's the point I'm trying to make here. Yes, if you're talking about African Americans, you are by definition talking about inequality from a legacy of slavery that's going back, God, for 400 years. And by the way, redlining, Jim Crow, and all of this other stuff coming up to like the 80s. So for the people who are like, well, you guys should have caught up by now, I can show you in the statistics and the amount of money, the income gap between one versus the other. And it is a direct vestige of how we and the origins of this country. Don't accept a token gesture for actual real change. You have millions of people all around the world and all around the United States who put all of their energy out. Should that energy only be worth this token gesture of something that doesn't really deal with the main economic dimensions of how our community is affected, how it's adversely affected? If you're talking about the 3-to-1 in COVID-19 deaths, we watched that as a nation. And it's like, yeah, you can't do anything about that. That's not an act of God. That's something wrong with your society that allows that. Fix that. Like, if you're going to have this argument of, wow, why are those people angry? Why are those people upset? They're angry and upset because your society distributes wealth in a way that is dramatically unfair. And these people who deal with that daily are angry and pissed off. And your political space lost the social contract in regards to saying, yes, we will be attentive to the needs of the public. So the public is gone elsewhere. Make your demand. Do not let them enforce their demand on you in a way where you accept something that does not give you what you actually need, when your demand should be far broader and far larger and deal with the community itself and the poverty that is in those communities that bring those policemen, or that incentivizes state to put more policemen there. Deal with the issue. It's poverty, it's inequality. And you would have that many more numbers by your side. Like, share.